Hello. Here I am looking at my Zoom, wondering, am I recording this correctly or not? I guess we'll see. My name's Tait Fletcher. This is Pirate Life, and thank you all for being so patient since our last installment of this. Want to say please go and check out different sponsors at onit.com and cavemancoffeeco.com, Original Nutritionals. We're at Deuce Gym right now. You can check us out in Venice, California at deucegym.com. And I'm here with Logan Gelbrich, who is a great friend and owner of Deuce Gym, and Dr. Mark Cheng, who's another fantastic friend, and he's got a new website out, or no? Sorry.
New website's coming along. It's at drmarkcheng.com, so www.drmarkcheng.com.
You know, my friend John Patton, I just saw, he's a friend of mine back in Albuquerque, and I posted a picture of you and I, and he said, you got to thank Dr. Cheng for his Tai Chi video. It's really helping change my life.
That's deep.
And he's just been, I've known the guy for almost 20 years, I guess, and really looking to change his life. He was like, last time I saw him, he was 6 days into a paleo diet.
Wow.
Probably around 400 pounds, but he's like looking to, like, you know, he's having trouble being ambulatory now. And so now, and like all these things are like really, it's amazing when you see somebody take hold of that and look to go into that way. So he offers his thanks to you. And it's amazing to me, like, how far reaching all this stuff is, and all my friendships and like people that I know, and then people that they're like, oh, you guys know each other too, and all that stuff. So I'm really excited to be here, and thanks you guys for making the time to come. We're just talking a little bit about different kinds of movement and stuff, and I don't know, what's your background a little bit. I'll let people say is very deep. I mean, for me, I would just go, he's an Inasanto guy, and then he's, you know, a Pavel guy, and he's a leader and an instructional doctor, and
don't believe the hype.
Please.
Don't believe the hype. Great. As usual, Tate's being way too kind. My true love is and always has been martial arts. I got into movement through traditional Chinese martial arts. You know, my dad was the first guy to expose me to Kung Fu and also to Tai Chi, my first teacher, and then got more into the martial arts, more into Chinese martial arts when I came out to LA for college. And since then, got deeper and deeper into that. And part and parcel of Chinese martial arts, also got into Chinese medicine, traditional Chinese medicine, both in the terms of tuina, which is like a Chinese osteopathy, manual medicine, as well as acupuncture and herbal medicine. So from there, was fortunate enough to meet a gentleman by the name of Dan Inosanto, who was Bruce Lee's top student.
How long ago was that?
I got to meet Guru Inosanto. Actually, the very first time I met Guru Inosanto was at the funeral of Ted Lukai, one of his training partners and students, and that was in the 90s. But then I reconnected with Guru Inosanto, I think I want to say 2004, through one of his teachers, Pac Victor de Toise, one of his Silat teachers. So Guru came to see me as a patient back in, like, I think 04, 05. I think 04. And then he then in turn introduced me to Pavel Tsulin, who is the founder of the Russian Kettlebell Challenge, or RKC, which then morphed into Strong First, which Pavel's now the chairman of. And I was fortunate enough to train directly with Pavel. As far as most of what I know about strength training with kettlebells, implements, whatever, I mean, Pavel probably taught me 95% of what I know. Pavel then in turn introduced me to a gentleman named Gray Cook, who was the father of the functional movement screen, and one of the guys as far as just leading minds in physical therapy and human performance.
Pavel's kind of, I mean, everybody kind of, like, he's a guy too that's I mean, any leader is that, I guess, in that way, and he's a gruff dude kind of, and he's got at the end of it all, you got to just thank, if you know about what a kettlebell is, you kind of have to thank Pavel if you're an American, right? It's like he brought that here. That was his thing. It's like there's Steve Maxwell and there's some other guys around that have really taken the ball and run, but like Pavel's the water that that poured into the U.S. as far as the kettlebell movement. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think, kettlebells have been here in the States since, long before Pavel set foot in here. I mean, they were old school strength implements back in the day. So, I mean, you can find old black and whites of guys in Muscle Beach or in Coney Island from back in the day lifting bells. But as far as having it taught in a systematized fashion and in repopularizing the kettlebell as a tool in recent history, everyone that's using bells, selling bells, manufacturing bells owes a debt of gratitude to Pavel for that. Guys like Steve Maxwell, Mike Mahler, Steve Cotter, all of these guys at one point learned or trained under Pavel. So they were certified as instructors under Pavel as the original crew of senior RKCs.
How many different certification schools are out there now? I mean, there's
countless.
Okay.
Countless. I mean, like,
have those guys, the 3 guys you named, have they started their own as well? Or do they still fly his flag?
I know. No. Those 3 are no longer with Pavel. I don't know if Steve Maxwell is teaching his own certifications. I do know he's still teaching strength workshops.
Yep. And has a lot of videos and all that stuff.
Mike Mahler does. And I do know for a fact that Steve Cotter has his own organization. Okay. They all have their own particular spin on, how they want to train, and they've gone and investigated their own training methods. Maxwell is an amazing wrestler. He's really done a lot of research into stuff like Zurkhane, like Persian wrestling, and seeing how a lot of their strength practices.
And his kid just competed at Metamoros, didn't he?
Right. His kid, I believe, is now currently a student of Hoyler's.
Good.
Yeah, his kid's definitely someone to watch. He's a hard worker.
Okay, yeah. Somebody had said that. I was like, that's Steve Maxwell's kid. It's awesome, man. And what I don't know. It's like your kids. Like I see them, and it's like to see kids grow up in an environment of like health and movement and consciousness and combat arts it's amazing. It's tremendous. So like whenever I look at Squealy and he's out with a staff or something in your backyard, it's just awesome, man.
Yeah, I think society unfortunately has I don't know what the right word is, demonized, I guess, teaching kids combat arts or teaching kids how to physically handle conflict, and just stigmatize it in such a way where that's violent or that'll make them violent dude, that's so not the case. It's like if you teach a kid what the consequences are of physical violence, they'll learn to appreciate that more and not be that way, I think.
Yeah, and I also feel like it's like if you're comfortable with it, then it's like we were talking about a guy yesterday, Logan and I, because that's what we do is we talk about other people. No, but a guy we know that's super duper like cocky and kind of in an aggressive way about almost everything, and then when he's talking about the thing that he's super duper excellent about, he's kind of more mild-mannered about it, and it's just matter of fact, like, well, I'm at the ceiling for where I could get here, but there's these other things that frustrate me that I need, and really like a kinder, gentler person, because that's his wheelhouse. He's and like, yeah, the more things we can make our wheelhouse, I mean, that's like the general physical preparedness kind of thing. It's like the more things that I can kind of be pretty okay at, man, I'm comfortable walking through life, and then that translates to my ego, like I'm not feeling outclassed or uncomfortable or like this is a mystery. Like, we get scared of those mysteries, so we got to put a name on them, whether it's a nice name or not, And so I feel like it's so neat to see well-rounded individuals growing up, and I don't know.
Yeah, you see that you mentioned people demonizing like kids and this violence thing, and it's funny that those conversations often like come from the people that are just ignorant to it, right? So like, is that really coming from like some well thought out idea, or is this a fear thing? And like I see all the people in my life, like this dude, people that are well versed in combat in some way are like the most respectful of other people. You know what I mean? Like I know, like because of you and like just being around like Keith and these people that have been in like this combat field that have some expertise there's like an extra layer of like human respect that is like you said, very clear to the consequences, all of these things. And yeah, it's just like a trip. Like the safest people I know are the people that can like go around ripping heads off of people. You know what I mean? Like it's a trip. Yeah.
I remember when Amal Easton was one of my first jiu-jitsu teachers, and he said, Tait, when you'll be able to roll around with women and children and everybody's safe, then you'll know you're getting better. And it was like that was the kind of thing. It's like I was talking to a guy at the Comedy Store the other night, and he had a background. He was a Taekwondo black belt, and he did maybe Kempo karate also. And he was talking about that, and he's, there's another drunk guy that's kind of next to him. He's like, what if I did this? And the guy's, just doing some traps and evades and things. And he says, well, what do you think about that? And it becomes a weird conversation sometimes, especially with people drinking or whatever. But I was like, I feel like jiu-jitsu is the best thing. And regardless, like I've done a bunch of bodyguard work and security stuff. And the thing that comes up is that once I touch your body, I'm responsible for your safety. Like, I'm not responsible to beat you and hurt you. I'm responsible for both of us being safe now. Right. And I can't do that if I'm going to put bones onto your head or so, like that's such a last resort kind of method of controlling a situation for me. And that's what it is. It's like, I'm not looking for violence. I want a controlled, safe environment. And so if I have to do that physically, and then just like simple arm drag to the back, I'm like, now everybody's safe. Nobody can hurt anybody from here. And he's like, and he looks at me like incredulous. And this is a guy that's a well-versed martial artist, but I'm like, it's that simple. It's just this, and now we're here, and we're both looking the same way, and you can't hit me or hurt me, and I'm in control of this, and and then it's like the safety that embodies. And I go, then the other thing is, we're in a patio filled with people. I was like, nobody here noticed that at all. Mm-hmm. If we're punched, people are going to notice that, and then everybody else is and everybody's blood comes up, and that's unsafe for the world. Like, we don't need that, And so I feel like that the more truth that we have in that, the more well-rounded, like the Jeet Kune Do masters and things like that. Like I also look at Eric Paulson a lot. Like one of Dan and Santo's highest ranked black belts. That it's like he went to Higan Machado, got a black belt. He got a black belt with Dan and Santo. He's one of the original catch wrestling champions. And it's like all that stuff. It's like that thirst for what's the best thing.
It's interesting that you bring up Eric Paulson. He's also one of those guys that while he doesn't really push it that much and doesn't really emphasize this facet as much as he could, he's one of the most intensely spiritual guys you'll ever meet, too. He's like just a genuine – he reminds me a lot of you. Very good, very genuine.
Nice
Dude, seriously, very skilled, very generous. He's like one of those guys that – doesn't need to take the time, because of who he is in the martial arts, didn't need to take the time to hang with me and to introduce me to techniques, but he did that. And it's like, what does he have to gain from that? Nothing, but he does it. He's that kind of guy.
Yeah. It's a huge thing, I think, I don't know, and like to be able to teach and transfer information, I keep thinking about like what I want to convey or what I want to put out the most, and like the importance is that of, if there's any messages, like to be helpful, how can I? And that's the thing too with being well versed at, whether it's as a martial artist or as scholastically in intellectual pursuits or as an artist. It's like, what can I do with this vessel that I walk around in to be able to be most useful to the community around me? And
where's the good we can create?
Yeah, right. And that's the thing. I don't know, that like Logan and I talk about here a bunch, is that it's like this is like a starting block for that kind of conversation to happen. And it's like, that's what, like all the people that are around me in my life, it's like they're like creating these conversations of like positive growth for communities around them. And I feel like that's the important thing. There's maybe nothing else that's very important other than that. I don't know. I was looking at that and we were talking a lot too, and I saw there was a blog that I didn't read that Danny posted the other day about training versus talent. Something like that. Is that the name of the blog?
So it was a thing. The title was skill versus talent and chance, right? And so basically, it's just a perspective that we talk a lot about here, and like, so we have to do a great job, I think, in my opinion, given what like the fitness industry is today. Like, people come here because we're a gym, and maybe they're interested in gym things, and they have a certain perspective on like how that goes. And I would say, unfortunately, many fitness experiences today are very surface level isn't the right word, but very like straightforward when it comes to like, well, I go to this place and then I sweat a lot and then I leave and I kind of check that box and now I'm on to like my other non-fitness activities for the day.
Life.
You know what I mean? And so it's funny. I'm completely ignorant to martial arts, but there is a metaphor there. You know that like you come here to get your black belt in fitness, right? And that's a skill-based approach. And so the blog that you're mentioning that I wrote was kind of, it spoke to that and largely a lesson that I learned like in the baseball thing, which is like our lives are very much so.
The baseball thing being that Logan is a professional baseball player at his previous life.
I played some baseball, yeah. Like life is largely out of our control. A lot of things are, we'll say, right? Like, and so if you believe that, things in life like fitness, for example, are skill-based, now I have some control, a little bit of control and responsibility. I can go from A to B and better myself, right? I can be an active participant in my life. However, if I have this more fixed mindset that says, well, either you are good at something or you're not, or I'm not athletic, therefore I happen to be good at art, and that's just the way that it is, then there's no control in that. Like, you've mailed it in.
And you're right. You're decided. That's
you are exactly right. Yeah, totally.
Your vote is in, and you've won.
Yeah, totally. And you're perfectly right. And, so with this skill-based approach, it's very much so, about growth and that I can get better at things. And because I can get better at things, I have, like, hands-on and control of, like, where I'm going in my life. And so people don't come here just to get tired. They come here to learn how to be better, right? And there's some fitness in that, too.
What have you seen in that in all your travels and teachings, Doc?
I totally agree with Logan. I think, there are a lot of people that tune out and they abdicate responsibility. They're just like, they think, well, this is just the way I move. This is just the way I do this. This is the way I do that. Okay, well, every movement, every whether it's a movement, whether it's a skill set in terms of how you lift, whether it's how you talk.
Or with pain, I suppose, too.
Certainly. I mean, like, look at all of – it's funny.
I have a bad back or something. You hear it all the time.
Yeah. Oh, it's just genetics. Oh, speaking of genetics, so this is a trip. Check this out. Let's talk about genetics. This is – yeah, dude, this shit blew my mind. So I was talking to one of my students, and this guy is actually an authority in the fitness world. And he was talking about his kid. And his kid was manifesting at a relatively young age some not so great posture. And then he goes, well, but that's probably genetic. And I look at him like incredulously, like, are you fucking kidding me? And I go, well, I'm sorry. Can you explain that to me? And he's like, well, the mom has really bad posture and her mom has really bad posture. And I'm like, have you ever considered that shit might be a learned behavior, like visually learned behavior, like not communicated in terms of like, okay, you will slouch your...
But communicated in the biggest way possible.
Right. But, it's like the visual, right? Body language is huge. So it's like, are you teaching verbally and intentionally, or are you teaching subconsciously and irresponsibly? And so, like, when I brought that to his attention, like, the oh shit look was priceless.
So amazing. It's amazing how pervasive that is in other spots. Too. I was talking to somebody, and they've got small children, and I was like, hey, when and it was like a directive thing, like, hey, did you get this done? No, this didn't get done. I didn't, put this in this slot or whatever. Like, very mechanical task that needed to get done. Mm-hmm. He goes, but whenever my coworker gets going through his feelings, it really causes like we just can't do everything. And he goes into this whole thing, and I said, it's so crazy. I said, are you telling me right now that the reason you couldn't complete this task is because somebody else's emotional state that was in the same building as you? And I'm like, and it's wild. And I said, and it comes up in a lot of places where you're going, hey, this because that. I said, which is such a broken construct, because you're never going to get better. Your fingers that put this there as long as that is controlled by somebody else's emotional state, your fingers are never going to learn how to move correctly in a way that will lead us to success. And I was like, and I just want you to consider, like, is that what you would show your kids? Hey, when you fail and you fall short, find Joey to blame or something. Like, find somebody that you can put that on. Like, you would never do that with children, but we do that. Like, I look in my own life, I've got to always examine that and go, at what point am I trying to push my own responsibility away and go, oh, these extraneous circumstances are the reasons why X, Y, or Z or whatever, instead of like, no, put your feet on the ground and put that foot in front of the other to go there, you know? Like, it's a trip, man, that conversation.
Yeah, Greg Cook talks about it like, you know, what our bad habit is we demonize what we can't do and we justify what we naturally do. You know, if you think about that, that's loaded, really. Like, we demonize what we can't do. Oh, I can't do that, so I'll demonize it, so I don't have to do it. But then we work and then we start justifying the stuff that we naturally do, but may not be the right thing to do. That's heavy.
Yeah. The other thing, like when we were talking the other night, Logan runs this thing. It's like a make shit happen seminar, and it's like a goal setting seminar. And the other night we got talking about it, and that, you know, there's an aspect to it where if we see success, and, you know, just talking about characterizing different parts of your own psyche, really, and your own archetype of, like, am I kind of person that whenever I see success, I go, shit, I'm never going to be able to be that or something? Or am I the guy that sees success and goes, oh, well, me too then, and here's a road to go on? Or am I jealous of that, or do I really cherish it and I think that that's fantastic and it gives me hope? So that whole thing, am I emboldened by this or am I broken down? And in that conversation, like, who we are in different situations of whatever comes up. And then it leads me into thinking about, like, when you talk about talent versus skills that you can learn and you can acquire, or you're just talented. And, like, the saddest guys I've ever seen come into jiu-jitsu rooms or wherever in life are guys that are talented. It's a drag because they come in and they're talented, so they have little success over whoever or whatever. That they're not horrible, and where everybody is kind of, you're moving in a new way. Like Logan, I didn't see it, but I'd heard when you went to the pit to go and train with Hackelman that you looked fantastic kicking a bag, like just like fluid and awesome, and like Logan's this super athlete that
you weren't there.
Looks like maybe as if, I don't know, if Pinocchio was really hammered drunk and had to twist and floor his hips over. I heard it was great. Anyway, it was really something good. Almost falling down, throwing a kick into the bag, like upsetting his own balance enough. And but it's like something that doesn't come up. Can you be awesome at it? Easy, for sure. And so going into it, though, if you're kind of good and you do everything right at first, you never work at it, because talent, having that ingrained in you, like if you're talented at something, it never teaches you to work hard. And like the guy that works hard is the only guy that really is of a relevant conversation in this world.
Right. And
so I always want to go, how can I work harder? Like, how can I look to be that person more? Well,
yeah, and, you know, you are a growth mindset type person in that way, like thinking that way.
Because I'm shitty at everything.
Well,
I have to work hard. That's the only choice I have.
But that's a perspective thing, and I think a key distinction is, like, you know, people that are good at stuff aren't all growth mindset people, and people that suck at stuff are not all fixed mindset people. You know, you can look at people that are the best in the world or in the upper, you know, echelon of their craft that still suffer from this fixed mindset, and they've luckily had enough success to where, like, it hasn't, like, ruined their career type of thing. But in that lens, what it looks like is, oh, I'm a great tennis player. That is what I do. I'm great at tennis, and I've always been great at tennis, and that's just how it goes for me. They have success, yet they still are stuck in this fucked up fixed mindset. However, when they are exposed to successes and failures, it's attributed to that thing that is largely out of their control. Oh, well, I lost today, but obviously the ref is terrible, right? Like, I got fucked. You know, I wasn't an active participant in that. Well, you can go and, like, win a million fights or whatever, but still think, fuck, like, I got to be better, right? You may not accept things in victory that you wouldn't accept in a loss because you're married to this growth mindset, thank God, like in my opinion. Like, and so same way, I would tell you, like, 1 million people in my life would look at my like
So
short
funny.
baseball career and say, man, you were gifted, man. Like you always just had it, you know what I mean? And not to like be ungrateful and whatever, like, yeah, I was gifted with some stuff, you know, but like, that's not my reality. Like, my reality is kind of like, well, fuck you a little bit, because I just worked harder than everyone that I know.
And you knew when you were little too. Like,
Yeah.
you had that goal. You had a goal, and you worked to it.
And, you know, it's just very easy to, like you said, demonize the things that we aren't good at. Well, because I don't have to address this thing that I'm not good at naturally, and that's that. You know, I think rather than, and this is a point that I just kind of realized, is like, rather than associate these natural tendencies to be like, you know, like for me in golf, like, you guys don't know this, but I'm the worst golfer in the United States. Like, there's no one worse. I'm so bad at
Right
golf.
now, all I'm hearing is that you're maybe a guy I could golf with.
Right, yeah.
I'm thinking that same thing too. It's like, dude, dude. Oh my God.
But so like the perspective for me is just like, well, I just don't want. I'm unwilling to put in the work to get good at golf, right? But there's a natural tendency there. Human beings work very linearly, right? We talked about this the other night, like, and that's just like in us, in our DNA. Like, if I listed 100 letters of the alphabet randomly in order and then asked you to recite them back to me, you'd have no shot. But if I told you a sentence in English, you'd be able to list
Right.
them back, because there's a story there. It's linear. We can make sense of things, like, as human beings that way. So shit happens in our lives, and we like to make a story about it. Like, well, I lost my tennis match today. Let me go back a few steps and explain why this thing has happened, right? And it takes us out of the game. Like, I'm no longer responsible. There's this story. Let me tell you about it. The referee fucked me, and then, oh, that's right, I didn't really sleep that well last night. And now, all of a sudden, there's this thing that makes it not your fault, you know? And that's just human beings.
That's a huge thing, too, of having people that are honest around me. And my mom was one of them. That was big, and I was like, oh, I can't do that. And she's like, let's not lie. Because that's a lie. You can. You're completely capable of it. You're choosing not to. You will not do that.
Right.
That's what you're doing. And
That's heavy.
and I was
Go,
like,
Mom.
And it is heavy, man. When you think about it, and then I'd start putting that through the filter of my life and going, whenever I'd say, oh, I can't, or that couldn't happen, or shouldn't, like all these words that I would use, and I would be like, no, you're either willing to, like you're saying, you're willing to, or you're not willing to, you know, and then looking for that, like, even if there is success, like, what is the greater success that I can have? There's a dude, I went to see some comedy last night, and there was a guy that was a buddy of mine, and he was he trained with Eric Paulson for a while. That was one of his first teachers, and then he was asking about, like, what my background was, and because he brought up Dan and Asanto, and he said, what was my connection with them? And I said, I don't really have a strong connection with him, but some of my teachers in stick fighting were Dan and Asanto students, and he's just a highly revered man, you know. And then I was telling him about my stick fight. The first one I ever had was against this guy named Dogzilla, who was a great big. He was like a running back for the Marine Corps football team, and now he's like a screw in some federal penitentiary somewhere.
Wow.
He's like just this huge mountain of a dude, and I'd seen him on tape run over a bunch of dudes. And I told him, I said, Arlen Sanford was my teacher, and he was saying, hey, Arlen's just a big, always smiley, really gracious, the kindest person ever.
Psycho badass with incredible skill and just mad.
His forearms look like Logan's legs. Like, he's just and he's a carpenter, so he's about his business, you know. And Mike looks at him. He goes, well, who do you train with? He says, oh, he trained with me. And he's like, I don't want to fight him. Right out of the gate, right away. Anyway, like, just because Arlen's power and the way he teaches is frightening to people. And the guy ended up halfway through the fight. He lost his stick, you know, and
That's not good.
And the guys I'm telling the story to, I lost mine once too. It's horrible, but that's another story. But sometimes your hand gets sweaty and you go and it's gone. You know, it's just gone.
Stickless.
And your stick, and he's sitting there. I don't know how he lost his. I think I hit his hand and he dropped it, and his hands are open. And at that moment, I feel like I made a mistake, and I wish I'd I wish I'd have thrown my stick to him and then ran at him and tackled him so that he'd have had a weapon and I'd have been without one, you know?
Right.
And the guy at Travis looks at me, he's like, so you're upset that you won? And I go, well, I said, winning isn't anything really. It's a part of that road, but it's like, that's the difference between something a little bit legendary,
right?
You know what I mean? and so you won, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
And then I started thinking, because a buddy of mine, there's a bunch of fights last night on Legacy FX or FC, and Holly Holm is an old training partner and friend for a long time, and she's being pitted to fight Ronda Rousey in the future potentially, and UFC just bought Legacy, so they own all those contracts. And she head kicked a girl, knocked her out last night. I really feel sorry for that girl, because Holly is just an excellent mechanic of kickboxing. And then my friend Clint Roberts, he fought and he got lost last night. And I was reading on the way over here, and he goes, you know, he's offers his apologies and that he'll be back better, and he's sorry he lost and all that. And it's weird so in these skill sets that we're talking about, the compartmentalization of the event instead of the breadth of what life is, right? So Clint lost a fight last night, and I was like, oh, I look at it now, like in retrospect too, is like, never be sorry for being on the journey. Like, you're on the road.
Right.
That was one part of the road. And it's not to say that winning doesn't matter, that the outcomes don't matter, but the outcomes kind of don't matter. It's like you're choosing to participate in the journey is
right.
What I'm trying to be more. And you hear all that shit all the time. It's like, happiness isn't a destination. It's through all this kind of stuff. But it's like more and more, like, viscerally, I can see that and taste it in my life and go, God, because all the events that I would have orchestrated, my life wouldn't have been, I wouldn't be here right now if the stuff that I thought needed to work out a certain way had worked out. And so then it's nice because it makes me like a kinder person in a way, because I'm not needing to push an agenda in. All I have to do is get out of bed, turn on a microphone, and come here and sit down. Like, that's my goal. Like, I don't need it to go anywhere. It's like, and it's like that, whether it's in my conversations or my workouts or whatever. It's like the biggest part of my life is just showing up, is just being on the road, you know, and reveling in that. And so what do you guys do as coaches to take the onus off of like an outcome and go, well, let's continue with movement, like, or expand on that idea?
So, first thing, everything that is corny is true. You know, like, for real. Think about it. Try to cross-check that. Say something that's corny and it's not, and see if it's not true. What you're speaking to is the entire game of baseball, in my perspective, and this is like the biggest lesson, the biggest takeaway, and that is this process-oriented approach as opposed to this result-oriented approach. And there's a lot of like beautiful metaphors in there, but you talked about that fight, right? There was a certain outcome that on paper was like a W, and that's supposed to be a good thing and all this stuff. Well, you know, the metaphors are everywhere, but like I mentioned before, you know, can't control all of life. You can control what you control, and then there's some things that you can't. And sports really create like some cool petri dish like scenarios to see this stuff play out in an interesting way, right? What can you control as a fighter? You can control your preparation coming into the fight, your attitude, your effort, and maybe like an approach inside the fight. Outside of that, you don't know kind of what variables are coming your way. Like, I guess, judgments from some sort of ref or scorekeeper or however that works. You know, how your opponent's feeling, their, you know, execution, etc. But you can manage your like 4 variables, you know what I mean? And you find that like the best performers in their thing manage that which they can control the best. So there are, I'm sure, fights that you could walk away with a victory and say, well, my footwork was atrocious in round 2, and all these things that you can walk away that are like unacceptable in a very process-oriented approach. You know what I mean? Areas to learn from that are going to make you better. But like if you walk away like just buried in this results-based focus, I got the W, let's go, we're going out to the bar, and that's that, and you don't get any better from that, which is the scary thing. So that's
always been the scary thing, is that like I never felt like I learned the first couple times that I won in tournaments, I was like, and then when I lost, I was like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm chewing on this for months until the next tournament.
Oh, yeah.
And all I'm doing is thinking about this loss and where it went south. It's like, that's where it first started, was after a Hicks and Gracie tournament, and I did really well. In the next tournament, I got smothered by a dude, and then I go, how do I, even in victory, because I didn't feel like I got better between there and there, because I was like, I was the champ. I took golds.
Oh, yeah.
You know, so there's that.
And that's so Coach Hill, Rich Hill, was he's the head coach at my alma mater, USD, and that's like a huge thing that I took from him. Is like, he said, we will never accept in victory that which we wouldn't accept in defeat, right? So just because the result was in our favor, you can't walk away being okay with a poor approach, poor preparation, bad attitude or whatever. And so baseball is one of those fucked up games where it gives you all of these in-your-face lessons. Think of like a hitter. It's like the most fucked up job ever. If you're excellent at it, you're going to the Hall of Fame, you're the best ever at this thing, you fail 70% of the time. That includes a whole bunch of different
That's the
interesting
craziest
shit,
thing. That's super interesting.
So think about two scenarios. I'm up at the plate, and I got some stranger throwing a ball 100 miles at me, and I got to do a bunch of stuff right. And say I pick the right pitch, put a great swing on it, I've prepared the way I've needed to prepare, I do everything right, and I hit a ball right on the money. Line drive, smoke it, right at somebody. The left fielder, boom, right there. No credit. Fail. On paper, that's a fail. That's very cut and dry. You get no points for that, right? That is not going to get you paid. I can be in the same scenario, strangers on the mound throwing things at me 100 miles an hour, and I pick the wrong pitch and put a fugly swing on this thing, roll over, hit a 3,000 hopper that happens to get through the infield, base hit, victory. How do you manage that? You get on first base and you're like, giving the number one and like pointing to the sky, and you're now 1 for 1, which if you go 1 for 3, you're going to the Hall of Fame. So I'll take that personally. You know what I mean? And so can you get to first base and start preparing to learn something from that? And can you do everything right and line out to the left fielder and walk back to the dugout and not spike your helmet and motherfuck the world because you did everything that you could? And that's that process-oriented approach versus this result-oriented approach. And that shit will make you crazy. You know what I mean? Like, that perspective is life in so many ways. You know what I mean? And it hurt. And here's the thing, is because we're human beings, it still hurts. You know what I mean? It's like, it doesn't go away. I still know all that shit. Like, that's good. You lined out to the left fielder.
Right.
And that's
You can
perfect.
know everything.
It hurts, man. It still hurts. And so, I don't know. That perspective it stays with me. You know what I mean?
And there's something about living in it that is super attractive. That there's like, it feels like fertile ground to be in. To be within that conversation all the time. Like almost like if everything were successful the way you taste success in that way, like it would be tasteless.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like you need life a little bit bitter. You need the rough edges a bit of it,
And talk about like living in the moment, which is something that like I think on the mental side and emotional side that like I think martial arts probably does it in a way better than any other real modality. Like that was our jam too. Could you step into that box and do your profession with, like, your recent history looks like you're 0 for 20. Like, I've walked up here and prepared my entire life for this moment and failed the last 20 times in a row. Well, can I get in there on number 21 and put together
the same
that which
swing,
I can control?
Yep. And
can I come in here and master that?
About success being contagious or being a learned thing, like winning being a learned thing or whatever. Like, that's why baseball is so interesting to me. And when you're looking at numbers like that, because you're, quote, failing way more often than you winning. And like, to continue in that, like, that's a whole different mindset, because it's almost like when you're fighting, like Anderson Silva would say that the fight starts at the weigh-ins. And when he's facing off with the guy after the weigh-ins, and he'll he'll do all kinds of shit. He'll kiss a guy, get really close to his face. He wore a mask one time, like the whole thing. And he goes, that's where I can win the fight right there. And so, like, if you're just messing with somebody's head, now if you make somebody miss the last 20 pitches, talk about messing with your head. Like, that's a whole nother kind of mental discipline then. Like, how do you go back mechanically then and go, okay, just going to go through the mechanics. I'm going to go through my little steel. I'm going to dig a hole in. I'm going to step behind it. I'm going to, you know what I mean? I'm going to tap the ground 3 times with the bat, come up, spit, and then I'm ready to go. Or what, you know, and do your thing and not be shaken.
And ready to go, like, genuinely ready to go. Not like I'm doing my routine, but in the back of my head I realize that odds are this is going to be 0 for 21.
Right.
And I don't want to, like, blow my brains out after tonight's.
Right. The odds are I'll never
again.
hit again.
Yeah.
That could be an eventuality.
And then so you're separating the emotion from this thing. I'm talking about, like, performance, like,
right,
process-oriented life. Like,
so then with the
real?
process, do you know, like, when you break that, now that we live in this day and age of slow motion and everything else that you can do we live in a spot where we're looking at, like, I can break down all the movement and to swing a perfect bat or whatever the thing is. Mm-hmm. And you can microanalyze it and go, oh, okay, here's where we need to get stronger. We need to do these exercises to make this turnover be faster and whatever. We can do this to get your hand-eye coordination better. All these things. At what point do then you go, and you just blow it all? I mean, it's the same in acting. Like, you need to memorize all these lines, and then you need to forget it all so that it can be authentic on the day. So if I'm thinking about it too much, if I'm thinking of all the mechanics of throwing a jab, I'm too slow. My timing, at a certain point, I just have to believe in the thousands of reps that I put in and let it go. And so is that the same kind of thing? I mean, because then when do we separate, you know, the process, those two modes of thinking?
Well, you know, and I feel like I'm getting this, just the aura of just sitting next to you guys. Flow is the thing. Like, you know, like martial arts, that's home, right? And that is the, I think, pinnacle of, like, human existence, these moments where we live inside of flow, right? Which is like this intersection of our greatest preparation and our greatest challenge, right? Like the moment where, like, time slows down and I'm Michael Jordan Game 6, you know, or I'm surfing a 50-foot wave and, like, everything's in slow motion. I'm seeing punches at, like, 1 mile an hour. You know what I mean? There's no thinking in that. Every athlete around the world describes that moment as, like, effortless, right? So exactly those times where you're thinking and you're being, like, choreographical or whatever, you know, mechanical, we're shitty. Like, we know that. But that's, like, the balance. I'm 0 for 20. I don't feel like I'm flowing right now. You know what I mean? And I guess that's the end goal for anyone who's trying to perform in any way. But that's it. Like, how do I get there? How do I spend more time in flow? I mean, that's the age-old question. You know what I mean?
How do you forget yourself enough to come authentically to the plate?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that ties into that is just that, you know, Gladwell's 10,000 reps, right? Or 10,000, was it? I can't remember, 10,000 hours and however many reps. But, you know, if you're still locked in that state of conscious analysis, you never get that feeling of purity of movement, like thought-free movement.
Right.
And you know, it's you need one to get to the other. You need those stepping stones, or you need those points of entry to be able to access that kind of purity of movement that's going to be sustainable. I mean, anyone can throw a sloppy punch just out of sheer piss and vinegar. But to be able to throw a punch that's going to be effective, that's going to be efficient, that's going to be repeatable, that's going to not injure you as the puncher, that's going to land with kind of, you know, the right shock power, that takes practice. And so I think people need to understand that you not only have to respect the process, as Logan was saying, but you also have to be able to acid test it. And like anytime you obsess on one side or the other, you're losing that 50-foot view. That 50-foot view is what reality is.
Right. Yeah, to get distance from it enough. That's what Coach Jackson would talk a lot about the cadences and the rhythms of, you know, you're trying to set a pace and everybody's trying to set a pace, and your job is to interrupt the other guy's pace and make him follow your pace, you know, and however you can disrupt that by changing those cadences, but still moving efficiently, like you're talking about.
I think in life, when it gets interesting is when you can make, you know, like Logan was saying, like when you can make time slow down. That's that state of hyper awareness, you know. But that hyper awareness, a lot of people associate anxiety with that. It's not. I mean, like when you really see time slow down, it's almost like you're relaxed in a way that's totally different,
Right.
you know.
And that being in that moment, I think too, is that like everybody says that, but that's a learned and practiced thing as well. Like there has to be a consequence. There has to be a consequence in order to not, like you have to go, what's the merit of staying in the moment? Why do I need to live there or whatever? And there's a lot of evidence why, but like the first time I really got super conscious of it was in a stick fight, and when wood is whizzing by your ear, and you go, if I'm thinking about anything else in that moment, I'm unconscious. Like it's got steep consequences. Like that's over. The lights go out. Right. And so being right into that, and when it was the first time I got so grateful for being able to participate in those fights, just because that was the first time where I thought there's almost like a God energy that's there that can only be experienced with this other person. That I got really grateful for my opponent. I was like, this is the only time that this has ever occurred where I felt like I needed this energy that was so strong. Like I needed all that pressure, and then something else happened, man. And there was like a third man in the room kind of thing. It was amazing to me. And I thought that's the fucking value of being in the moment, man. Is like when you're there and you're hyper present to what it is. And those are the, you know, I mean, and that's everywhere. All this stuff spreads everywhere in every facet of my life, whether that's conversationally with people, like being with the people that you're with, being engaged in what I'm doing. And then it goes back to, you know, I just heard the other night somebody ran a marathon, and they're like, I didn't even train for it, you know? And I've done a lot of that in my life, and in the fight game we would talk about, you know, you've got to earn it. Did you earn that? Did you work hard enough? You can win, but did you earn it? Did you work towards it becoming better, or did you just happen to win? And the difference of that, of really owning the whole experience and going, I can finish that marathon, but what would happen if I really owned it and I really trained for it and I really were engaged and accountable, again, being accountable for my life?
You know, that thought about training, it's interesting. A lot of the listeners might think that, you know, oh man, full contact stick fighting or fighting MMA or playing pro baseball, these are things that are so far out of my reality. But, you know, you can achieve that hyper awareness two ways. You can either achieve that when the pressure's so immense that you have no other option as far as survival but to achieve that kind of natural, like, hyper awareness, or you can slow shit down to the point where, like whether it's movement, whether it's an exercise, whether it's your life, whether it's the processes that you have to go through during the day. Time is that quote unquote fourth dimension, right? Like you have to be able to be able to take control of time. And so if you can slow the process down to be able to respect the components that are in there and become aware of the components that are in there, then you can achieve some semblance of control over it. And that's where the identified, you know, predict, decide, execute paradigm comes in.
It's cool. I never thought about it like that, but like that's it. As being that in that appreciation, I feel like I was dull enough to the point where it's like you need to have this really high pressure aspect to it, because I needed to know about it right then. But going out from there, it's like, yeah, it's like whatever you're practicing. It's like when you're washing cups, wash the cup. Like that whole kind of thinking. It's like it's all, and there's no, and I guess too, there's not an ego in that. Like when you're in that moment, there's not a. That's the other thing, is if you're self-obsessed, you're falling off the cliff in a way, you know.
You know, it's funny, like talking about movement, for example, right? Like high pressure is awesome because it brings about results really fast. Like it separates the wheat from the chaff really fast. The only downside to that is it's like the risk factor is huge.
Right.
You know, slow, so there are times when you move so slow that people just tune out. They get bored. They're it's like that squirrel mentality, like squirrel, rather than like really tuning in and being able to go slow yet still be totally mindful and realize that going slow is still a sensory rich environment. And then that's I think a lot of people don't appreciate how being able to improve awareness and improve performance while minimizing risk, if you're mindful, how rich going slow is. Like, talking about Tai Chi, for example. We were talking about that earlier before we the
Is
podcast.
it true that Tai Chi is like one of the original high-level combat sports? I heard like the Taoists were like Tai Chi and Aikido or something like that, some mixture of that all the monks trained, and that they were just vicious killers.
So check this out. Tai Chi, a lot of people think about Tai Chi as just like slow motion kung fu. And in reality, the speed is completely irrelevant. Like the way my dad explained it to me was like, you train slow to magnify errors in your balance, magnify errors in your tension, magnify errors in your impatience, magnify errors in proprioception, whatever. But when it comes time to fight, I dare you to try and do that shit slow.
Right.
Like you have to be able to understand the biomechanics, the balance, the posture, the structure, and create this kind of deep relaxation. Like become aware of your own tension, your own rigidity, your own impatience, and then once you've been able to optimize that, then apply these techniques, then apply this stuff in fighting, in combat.
It's the same way with like boxing or with anything, or with jiu-jitsu, like teaching guys, and everybody wants to show you how good they are, so they want some rapidity to their movement. And I'm like, what happens, I mean, is that you just teach yourself bad movement then. So you've repped it 100 times horribly, and so you're always going to be mediocre, versus you go slowly and you build that body memory. It's the same kind of idea, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, like every time you rep a movement, your neuromuscular system is hitting save. You hit load, you put load on it, your neuromuscular system is hitting save. Like if you rep a movement and you rep it in a mindful way, and you do it with a way that's got that high attention to form, and you hit save enough times with that kind of good movement, with that kind of awareness, with that kind of perfection, then under stress, when you need to amp up the speed, your default is so much purer than everyone else's.
Yeah, you'll be perfect then.
I mean, perfection's questionable. I mean, it just depends on the amount of stress that you're under. But you're more often than not, like, I'm not saying that every time you rep, you have to rep super slow. You have to rep at a variety of speeds, at a variety of loads, to see what your body's capable of. You have to test it. But the more mindfulness you put into perfecting that form, into perfecting your awareness of all the factors that go in, the better you'll be under stress.
What is it with swords? There's swords in Tai Chi?
As I was taught, there are 4 main weapons in most of the Chinese martial arts. What they say in Mandarin, 刀枪剑棍, broadsword, spear, straight sword, and the staff. In Yang style Tai Chi, which I learned, I only got exposed to the straight sword and broadsword, just a touch of the spear, not much of it at all. So yeah,
there's a director of photography on the movie Two Guns, and we were at a hotel, and every morning he would go out and do Tai Chi out in the yard in the little square in the middle of the hotel, and but like early in the morning, like almost before he's there while the sun is coming up, and I don't know, he was there a few days. We'd just moved locations, and the security guard is there just crossed arms, and he's on his radio, and then the police come, and the dude is like maybe 70, long ponytail, all white hair. He looks like Gandalf, kind of, Right. And but he's out in the middle of the square with a sword going. Really, this is awesome. That's I don't know a whole lot about Tai Chi.
It's one of those things where I think a lot of people have given it a very, I don't know what the right word, myopic, I guess, rep, because like they'll see it as like old people in the park doing something slow motion, and while certainly like it's got the ability to be an exercise form for those individuals, it's got a lot of other value too. I mean, it's just like what do you decide to view it as? When you view something with a reductionist mindset, you're going to reduce it down to this one thing. But like that, it's like the 5 blind guys and the elephant. What are you holding on to? What do you feel? Versus like, are you able to step back and open your eyes and see the entirety of the animal?
Right. Yeah, that's cool. I like that. I like the 5 guys in the elephant too, where one's holding the tusk and the other the tail and the other yeah.
And they just can't figure out what they're.
Yeah, well, they're all having a very different experience
Right.
about the same entity.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That's brilliant. It's funny you talk about like the speed of things. I was trying to just relate things to like what I know, and I think about, if you talk about like we'll say like an amateur approach to this baseball thing, you go to like the batting cage and you put your quarter in the machine, and there's like different speeds and stuff, and there's like this huge amount of like care and attention put on like, oh, can I hit in like the 80 mile an hour thing or the 90 mile an hour thing, and if you go to any like major league like hitting facility, like these guys are underhanding balls to each other, like batting practice happens at like 50 miles an hour.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's you can't maximize that training experience like you're talking about at like game speed, so they don't, you know what I mean? And it's a trip, it's like I was totally digging your that like awareness factor, like this is purposeful movement, and that happens maybe at a certain speed, and that when stress happens you're going to fall back on the level of your training, right? You're not going to magically like rely on these skills that you haven't repped your 10,000 hours.
There's no way.
You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Whenever you see guys get in trouble in fights and they get shook, and the guy's like a Division I wrestler, and he's been working on his boxing, and he's chosen to box with the guy, and he gets rocked, he shoots a double leg right away. Like he goes right back to what's his wheelhouse, and that's, I don't know. One of my buddies is a really good wrestler, and he'd said he was from Ithaca, New York, and he'd said that his wrestling coach is like, don't even do a double leg in a tournament unless you've repped that 10,000 times. And that was
Right.
that was way before Gladwell's shit and all
Right.
that. But they're like, that was the big thing in his training in Fletcher's school was, he's like, man, if you haven't worked a single or a high cross, like you haven't put your numbers in, don't
Yeah.
you dare bring that shit to my tournament. You're representing our school.
Oh, for
and it was like, it was crazy.
sure.
It's a crazy idea, about like, oh, I'm gonna just try this out. It's like, well, you haven't earned it. You haven't put that into your body enough to earn that, and that the training modalities, how they're changing now too with like fighting and CrossFit both. It seems like CrossFit's like 10 years behind MMA in its kind of growth as a new sport, and whether it's like with the commerce of it, with the televised, like people trying to move it forward, it's a very similar entity to that, and I wonder how the training will affect that too, because for a long time in MMA, and still in most gyms everywhere, the training is hurting the guys more than the fights, right? And
Right.
so you're having more damage and more serious injuries where time off happens within training than you are on actual payday, and why that is, why that is clear. You're throwing bones at each other and you're trying to really damage each other, and so there's different training camps that aren't very safe. But even amongst the safest, you're still, if you're sparring a couple times a week, which most guys do, they'll shoot box or kickbox a couple times a week, you're taking body damage that is maybe not useful. And then it gets into the conversation of what you're saying is like half speed all the time until game day. You're not going to be hitting 89 mile per hour
Right.
balls,
Right.
and that same thing of like training in some regard only gives you toughness in MMA.
Like full force training.
Training
like,
is only going to make you tougher. Like, what can you withstand and continue to go? Where's your heart?
Right.
But it's not getting you better. And
Right.
so, and then at a certain point, it's only then you're getting negative results because you're only hurting yourself more. And only right now are coaches even starting to think in those terms, let alone act upon that, because fighters are superstitious guys too, and they've always done it this way. And even if it's not the best or it doesn't make sense, you really have to have a conversation like this about it to go, you're yielding diminishing returns every time you go, and every time you train like this for a camp, for a 3-month camp, you're taking off maybe 6 months of your whole career. Like, you're not going to be able to continue, and that's for real. And
Right.
and I would imagine the same damage would come, whether it's from elbows or whatever in baseball, or also now in CrossFit, we're seeing people with blown out backs and torn shoulders and different things like that, because of the sheer volume that's going into it. Or it's, I guess, similar to like if you can learn anything from marathon runners, I don't know what the fuck you can learn from them. But if there's one takeaway from those fucking people,
don't run 10 a year.
Is that when they're running for a marathon, they never run more than 9 or 10 miles or something like that.
Right.
They're not practicing by running 40 miles, which is what an idiot like me thinks. Like, well, if I got to run 26 miles or whatever a marathon is, I better put in 100, so I'm really good at it. So the 26 is easy, and it's like that's such the wrong approach, Tate.
That's the big joke around here about, like, you got like a 20 rep max day on the board or something like that.
Right.
How do you warm up for that? Once you do a set of 100 with an empty bar, and then a set of 75.
Right.
With, no, it's like that's not fucking how it works. I think you can look to like the SEALs and like law enforcement too, talking about like falling back on your level of training. I mean, who trains better than, say, like the SEALs, right? When shit hits the fan.
When there's real consequences.
Very real consequences. What shows up, and that's your level of your training. So what do these guys do? They kick in a door, and they walk in and clear the room, I don't know, 30,000 times, at, like, meticulous pace. Like, you put a holster on my hip and a gun. I may know how to fire it, but you, like, put me in a situation where, like, shit's getting real. Like, I won't be able to get the fucking gun out of my holster. You know what I mean? You fall back on your level of training.
Comes up,
and so you come out and you do these efforts at 50% speed so that when shit hits the fan, it's easy and it's there. And then you can access.
And it's gradiated.
Right.
It's at first, it's clearing your holster and coming up with a line of sight, clearing your holster. And then it's like, well, maybe now we're going to have a guy run at you while you're clearing your holster. Or, like just these different pressures, but you have to build that pressure. You can't just go in DEFCON 5 on this. Yeah, exactly. Double draw.
It's interesting listening to this conversation and talking about injuries in training camps. There's a story that Guru Inasano relayed. One of his teachers, Lucky Lukai, went in one time to his gym, and when Guru tells a story, he almost always like tears up. He said that one time he was back in his school when they were really like developing a great stable of fighters. Lucky Lukai came in and right in front of all of his students called Guru Dan an idiot. It's like, what are you, stupid? And Guru was shocked and just like, and hurt because he didn't really know how to react. And so Lucky Lukai supposedly said, like, look around at your fighters. This guy's got a broken nose. This guy's got a black eye. This guy's got a cut lip. And just went down the laundry list of all the injuries that the fighters had. He goes, all these guys are getting hurt doing what? In training? None of your guys should be hurt in training. They should all look just fine, so that when they get in the ring, that's when when you're like you said, when you're fighting for your purse, that's when, okay, if there's an eventuality that comes out and you get dinged up a little bit, okay, fine. But like training should be for building the body, should be for building skill, should be for building performance, not for dinging it so that you have something more to compensate against. And what you guys were just talking about earlier, as far as like how to maximize safe training and improve performance, rather than kicking the shit out of someone and testing them in training. It's like your training should be about building improvement rather than like the constant gut check. And I think that's where some gyms or some schools can't clearly differentiate.
Right. And also what my work capacity is. Because like a guy like me, I think, well, if I just work more, I'm going to get the result I want. If I keep pushing more, I'm going to get the result I want. More work is better. I'm working hard. So what that tells me is that I'm going to get a good result because hard work gets results. Everybody says that. And it's at a certain point not true at all.
Totally.
Because hard work, I only have a capacity for so much to be replete with my recovery as well. And so that never comes in as a component, especially with younger athletes. It's such a difficult thing to go, you need to take a day off. I mean, I remember the first time, Jardine had told me, hey, man, you need to just take a rest day. You're overtrained. Because I was waking up and my heart rate would be elevated. Like, it'd be, I don't know, 100 beats a minute or something. I'd wake up racing. And he's like, that's a sign you're overtrained, And I go, okay. And he says, so just, I want you just to rest. I said, all right. And he calls me up I don't know, 11 or 12. And what are you doing? Oh, I'm just getting ready. I'm going to go for a run. And I said, I thought you were resting today. I said, yeah. But I've got to do something like, and so that being in control of the mind and the moments and everything, like you're saying too, it's like, do I just need to do something to be okay? Or, what, there's a little thing going around. Don't just do nothing, sit there or something like that. You know what I mean? That whole thing of being relaxed and being recuperated is like a whole nother part of that discussion.
It's funny. Pavel always says like change of activity is a form of rest. But think about like this. Like as kids, we all heard about like in agriculture, you change a crop on a plot of land every season.
Yep.
So like one season it may be beans that you're growing, one season it may be corn, one season it may be whatever wheat.
Right.
Fourth season you let it lie fallow, right? Like those changes of crop allow that soil not to be stripped. Right?
Sure.
Like you don't just farm one kind of crop on that soil all freaking year round and just beat the shit out of that soil to the point where you have to put artificial...
Where it's sand.
Right.
It becomes sand.
You don't have to put artificial, fertilizer and nutrients in that and just corrupt the soil. Similarly with the human body, it's like, think about when we were kids and we were kids growing up as people that either played 3 sports or knew people that knew people that were 3-sport athletes before specialization became the vogue for parents. And it's like parents these days think, okay, well, my kid's good at baseball, or my kid's good at golf, or my kid's good at taekwondo, or my kid's good at judo. So they'll do that all freaking year round.
Right.
And while well-intentioned, unfortunately, like when you cause a child to specialize that much that early in life, their neuromuscular system doesn't develop the same way.
Right.
Their brain doesn't develop the same way. That's not only called a rut. That's called like, like specialization's awesome for insects.
Right.
Like... Dude, like as human beings, we have so much potential in terms of movement.
Especially during that time of growth.
Totally.
When you're between like 8 and 17 or something like that, when they say that that's when all your auto mechanical responses develop. And so the things that you get good at during those times, like, which is my whole thing about, like, if you see a girl with a really nice ass, you're like, were you a gymnast, a volleyball player, or did you, like, she played soccer? Like, if they're in the East Coast, you probably did field hockey. Like, but that during those times, like, people grow up. It's like Rogan kicks like a savage, but he's been doing Taekwondo since he was 10 years old or whatever. And it's like when you develop that kind of fast twitch response, you're able to turn your hips in a better way. You're able to be quicker. You're able to be more. You got more elasticity. So all that stuff, whether you're talking about your flexibility or your speed or anything, those are the years where that's trained in.
Yeah, it's really young.
I read a crazy article about it, and they said, so now what kids are getting good at is their thumb dexterity, because they're on PlayStation, they're great at Medal of Honor or whatever it is. And I thought, well, that's so interesting.
And even in the like you're saying, in the sports element, like, video games for sure is like a thing for kids. But like, Don Ricci, our weightlifting coach here, was sharing this idea, and that there's been multiple articles about this like problem of like GPP capacity in our youth. And it comes from this high level early on specialization, like travel basketball and travel baseball at like age 7, and there are huge consequences there. Like we are like operating regularly on kids' knees and shoulders at like, oh, you're 13 and you've had 2 knee surgeries.
It's a fucking epidemic. I mean, like, you look at the epidemic of ACLs in young female athletes. This shit didn't used to be there. Did we change that much that dramatically on a genetic level? Fuck no.
No way. And that is largely, I think, just a deficiency of like this broad general capacity. Am I moving through ranges of motion other than my free throw? You know what I mean? But I'm willing to ramp it up at 100 miles an hour inside of my specialized sport, but no, I'm not willing to prepare in any way for that. You know what I mean?
Totally. I mean, one of the things that I hear all the time is training people in a way that requires patience, or having people do exercises that requires like a high degree of detail or patience isn't sexy. Dude, injury, being hurt is not sexy.
Right.
Like, teaching people how to be patient and understand how that feeds into performance, that shit is sexy.
Right. And, it's a trip. Baseball, in a lot of ways, is a very, very conservative sport for good reason, and it makes it kind of a cool sport to be in, but also to its own detriment. You know what I mean? Like, very much so, baseball is living in this perspective that you can trot a kid, you know, out there and he can ruin his shoulder for the rest of his life. Like, irreplaceable or irreversible damage. But as long as it happens out on the field, it's okay. But they're completely unwilling for someone to even bear the risk of being injured inside the weight room or conditioning for that. I'm not willing to expose an athlete to potential injury in preparation of this workload. But, yeah, I'll trot him out there and ruin his shoulder for the rest of his life as long as it happens out there on the field.
Dude, I'll tell you, as a clinician, I've seen youth athletes in a variety of sports, baseball, fencing, whatever, just gymnastics. Little kids that are in especially unilateral sports, meaning like they're issuing force just in one direction, such as baseball, such as golf, fencing, things like that. And the kinds of injuries, the kinds of repetitive motion injuries, I'm talking non-contact injuries. It's one thing if Tait and I spar and he clobbers me with a round kick and you know, I have a fractured femur. That I get.
Right.
That's a contact injury.
Right.
But like if you didn't do anything contact-based, and as a kid you're manifesting with repetitive motion injuries that used to be common for people in their 30s and 40s, and now you as like a 12, 13-year-old are now being sidelined because you've got degeneration in joints because you're training so lopsidedly in a sports-specific fashion rather than in a GPP fashion.
Right.
That's fucked. We are doing our kids a massive disservice.
I have that problem. Like, even right there, reaching for that microphone right there, I got to go really slow. Like, but even I'd feel it like throwing jabs and all that, and throwing any punches, and then I'd kind of hyperextend my elbow a little bit. I'd have little tears through my elbow. I had to get Prolo on a bunch of times, all that stuff. But that leads to arthritis early in kids, doesn't it, Doc? Or what happens there with the when you're talking about a degeneration of the joint itself?
I kind of have a bone up my ass about the word arthritis because it's sort of like a catch-all phrase for like.
I've talked to another doctor who doesn't believe in arthritis. He's like, "That's not real," and I'm like, "So I don't know what that means either."
Arthritis
feels real.
Arthritis as a term for pain inside a joint, I get that, but I think that term is kind of overused and sort of like it as I have some degenerative change in the joint. You know, some reshaping of the bone or some reassignment of tissue based on sport-specific training, like, you know, specific, like the SAID principle, right?
Isn't that what we're talking about with arthritis? Like inflammation of certain parts of the joint to where.
Not necessarily, because like with arthritis, to me, is the term that a lot of people use just to describe pain in the area of a joint. What can cause pain in the area of a joint? So much shit can cause pain in the area of a joint. You can have situations where a tendon is thickened. You can have situations where a muscle is hypertrophied, meaning like it's pumped in that area. You can have local effusion, meaning like there's swelling in there. You can have a tumor in there. All of these things can cause pain in the area of a joint. You can have a structural abnormality where there's a tendinous or a ligamentous tear. All of these things can, like I said, can play into.
I feel like I have all of those. I also feel like, I don't know if you ever tried this before.
What, the coconut butter? No, I've never.
Coca Java nut butter. I just had one from my friends at Original Nutritionals. They're out there. It was weird. It was like there was a thing that they were talking about this, like, I don't know, back in '86, I think. But finally this year you can have one, and they're delicious. You just peel off the goodness, and I don't know. You have any nut allergies?
No.
Then you're gonna be in joy right now.
Dig it. Actually, you know, it's funny. Original Nutritionals has been on my radar. I think I started following them or started noticing them thanks to you and your posts. But you know, just to see, one of the things I gotta say is really cool to see is that people now that are focusing on performance are also looking at stuff that's good to put in the body, not just from a laboratory standpoint, but from an ethics standpoint. And that, I think, is really, really dope. And tall props to you. Tall
These
props
are all
to Joe.
free range cashews that Logan put in there. They're all lovingly raised.
But were those cashews grass fed?
Grass fed. They're But also a lot like the same way they're like a yard bird. I don't know, like they'll just eat scraps or whatever out there. And they just grow up the biggest, plumpest, happiest cashews ever. And that and the coconut butter they make out, and I don't know what goes on in there. A little bit of coffee. It's delicious.
Making out is awesome. There we go.
Good.
I dig
it's
that.
a good little high fat treat.
Dig it.
I have a great high fat story too. I was at the UFC in Dallas. I was waiting for my car. I like
Holy
to say I was
shit, this is good.
Yeah, it's nice,
Folks,
right?
dude, if you don't have this, like, what's the website? Original.
Well, you can't get it from their website. I don't know. It's like it's
what the
weird.
fuck is that all about?
They were from Pony Express days or something.
So it's kind of fucked up. There's only 2 mics, and you guys can just go back and forth.
Yeah,
with
yeah,
me sitting right
yeah.
here. All right, I didn't pay him to say that, but Tait likes to talk shit on this thing because it wasn't 1986. It was 2012, I think, that we first broke out.
I've had a
this-
lot of head injuries. That seems
this
like
nut butter thing that's taken 2 years to get inside of the pouch that it now sits inside of. But hey, we're coming along.
It's so
Tait.
good. It's so delicious.
It is
it's
good.
a nice little treat, right? And so you want to believe this? There was a time in my life where I had like 12 jars, and you could just eat that by the spoonful.
Dude, this shit is like Nutella and porn mixed together. This is fucking amazing. Oh my god.
It's kind of crazy, right?
Dude, this is like, if you dig Nutella or you dig anything like kind of, oh my god. If you know what Nutella is, you need to get some of this stuff. This is just beyond dope. Beyond dope. Oh my god.
It's
I can't talk 'cause I'm drooling.
It's
Here,
all realness.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So you can get it at cavemancoffee.com, but
And you guys are sold out for a while.
you might be
too.
able to get it at.
So originalnutritionals.com.
Well, I thought they were gifts, so there was like 3 boxes that came, so I just took one and threw it in my truck, and I was like, "This is delicious." Finally,
We're working on this magical back-end website where you can order stuff and it'll show up at your doorstep moments later.
because
right
direct
now,
sales is the way to go on the internet.
what's the internet?
We don't need all these guys out here.
Right?
We don't need these Vitamin Worlds and Whole Foods.
We got you busy now. That's like a babysitter. That's good. What's this fat story in Dallas?
Oh, well, shit, man. I'm at the UFC, and I don't know. Did I tell you? You probably saw because I posted pictures everywhere. I got to meet Chuck Norris.
Yes.
So that was fucking awesome. So
He can do all the push-ups, right?
Oh, dude. Yeah. All of them. I was going to actually do some push-ups, but Chuck had already done them all. So I don't do them anymore. But he Rogan calls me like a week before, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be in Dallas because we got Concrete Cowboy out there." So I was going to go see them, and I was going to go see the UFC anyway. And Rogan got a couple tickets and says, "Yeah, cool, I'll see you there." I said, "Right on, man." I said, "I'll probably be in Thursday or something," and watch him perform comedy, which is crazy. Just like that podcast, like what's that? Like I went to, I think it was like, I don't know if it was like the Verizon Center or AT&T. It was like some big, huge stadium type joint. Like, and we used to just go play in little clubs, like a couple hundred people or whatever, thousands of people. And I got there late. I flew in late, and I walk in and right up to the stage. Awesome tickets, and it was fucking. It's crazy what technology does. Like that's all because of his podcast.
Right.
Like in the way that's grown. It's a trip. So anyway, he'd call me like the week before. He'd go, "Hey, well, cool. If you're going to be there for sure," he says, "Dude, they're inducting this dude into this guy Bob Wall, and Bob Wall was like in Enter the Dragon and stuff apparently." He goes, he's runs this Black Belt magazine or Black Belt Incorporated or something like that, and they're inducting his teacher into the Hall of Fame. I said, "All right, cool." And he goes, "Yeah, Chuck Norris is going to be there." He says, "Do you want to go meet Chuck Norris?" And I was like, "Yeah." I don't know what you said all those other words for before Chuck Norris. Like I was in right then.
Wasted my time.
And so we went down. It was rad, man. It was cool and a cool dude. The nicest hair you ever saw on a man. I mean, people say that shit's a wig. I don't believe that. Because he's not. If that's a wig, maybe that is a wig. Maybe I'm being silly, but he's never. he never ever had signs of baldness at all. He just looks great all the time. He looks like he's like 50 years old. And it turns out I worked for his son on a show, for a Marvel TV show, and it was his son, and I was like, I was blown away because like Chuck doesn't look old enough to have a son that's like in middle age at all. Like,
does he have an age?
Chuck?
Does he age like
I think he's
normal
aged
human?
less.
He's
like,
younger now than
he's
he was
a trip, and his wife's
10 years
beautiful, wonderful, just and like normal people, just like really accessible and just kind.
That's
like,
crazy.
Really, man, what a gentleman, and on like I don't know. Anyway, that was rad. And then so I dropped Joe off back at the hotel, and I'm waiting for my car, and this dude, these two guys, kind of like older dudes. There's all the fighters in this hotel, but it's like the Ritz. It's a nice hotel. It's like the nicest hotel in Dallas, and then there's these two guys that look like they should be at the hotel, you know. And then there's guys like me that are there too, and they're. The one guy's like, oh, so are you with these guys or whatever? I see a bunch of guys with disfigured ears and stuff around, and I go, well, some of my friends are here and they're fighting tomorrow night, you know, and I said, but you know that's like it's not something I do anymore or whatever, and we start talking about the same thing about brain injuries, and we start talking about, and I go, what do you guys do there? He goes, well, I'm a cardiologist. I'm giving a symposium here in Dallas and talk about heart health and stuff. And his friend walks up. He goes, "Oh, this is my friend, and he's a heart surgeon as well." And oh, all right, cool, man. And
I put
so
butter in my coffee.
yeah. Well, it goes to that, right? So I start talking about these guys. I said, you know, in this hotel are the finest MMA trainers and coaches in the world. And I said the conversation we just had about mitigating brain injury and about changing training modalities so that you could have longevity as a fighter and maybe even have better timing and coordination of a fighter by not suffering useless damage to the brain by not training in this fashion any longer that we just talked about, which I elucidated to him. I said that's unknown to most of these guys. Like most of them aren't having that conversation. Like that's a new conversation. It was like, because people are so crazy, they're superstitious about whatever. Like, I need to eat like this. And I said, so then when I quit, I'd started, you know, moving into more nutrition that spoke to me feeling better all the time instead of like what I thought was performance. And what I found was a more functional and easy place to live in, dietarily and all that. And I said it'd be similar to you guys talking about, you know, you guys are heart guys or whatever. I'm sure you went to school a long time for that, but up till just a few years ago, everybody was talking about that cholesterol is causation for heart disease, and that fat is causation for heart disease, and that's all false information that got fed out because cholesterol was the first thing that could be isolated in the blood that you could track and mark, and then there was no correlation really with that except that they had some guys that had high cholesterol that also had heart disease happen to them, but there was zero causation, although they did say that so they could sell more statins and all that, and that's a whole nother kind of talk that maybe we won't get into, but like all that's happening, and so now you guys are just on this front end, and I don't even know where you are on that conversation, what you believe, but that's all bullshit if you didn't know. Right. You know what I mean? I'm telling them, and I'm so confident in what I know just from my own body and from the people that we're around, you know, that like all our friends are, that I know that that's fucking true. And these guys, the one guy, the older guy, looks to his buddy, and goes, God, he's like, you know, that's what I'm talking about. Like,
really?
That's what I'm going to talk about is like this new conversation that, like, how's this gorilla fucking know what what I've been to Harvard, God damn it.
Yeah,
or
we
what,
killed
you know?
like 20,000 people, and then I just figured out last week.
And how cool that is. Like, that's my favorite fat story right now. And I'm like, it's cool to see guys like in huge mainstream medicine, because still you hear, I've got friends of mine that go to the doctors and they're like John Patton is one of them, the guy that was really on 6 days paleo and loving your book, is that, you know, they're telling them, well, you know, eat your diet. Like, if they eat the diet that I would tell them, they go back to their doctors, and their doctors are like, fuck, no, that's a guy that wants to prescribe to kill you. When I'm like, that's a guy that, you know, we both are saying the same thing about different diets.
Same shit with salt.
Yeah,
Same shit with salt.
exactly,
You know,
exactly.
the AMA came out and was like, oh yeah, our salt guidelines were kind of fucked up.
Yep.
Dude, why do you think the ancients said for so many years, like even in Rome, it's like the Romans and I think, and maybe the Greeks also said they paid their wages in salt, or it's just
There
talk
was
about someone
wars
as being
over salt.
Exactly. I mean, like, you know what I'd love to see?
That man isn't worth his salt. That's a saying.
Mm-hmm. You know, I'd love to see is a biochemical study, or actually a timeline checking when the low salt fad came out, and then when the little blue pill started getting marketed.
Sure. I mean, it's
That's interesting. That's really interesting.
Even right now, like I was talking to a buddy of mine the other night, and he's like, yeah, they say salt's bad. Then we need a pill for salt being bad, so you can tolerate salt because we don't want to take salt away from it. And so we're interested in selling the pill though. And that whole thing when like ADHD and all these kinds of things, and people started getting prescribed stuff, and then all of a sudden you see the occurrence of that so-called illness that was just developed go through the fucking roof. And
Totally.
And it's only because your doctor is your drug dealer, and which is crazy to me. Like in the recovery field, like being sober and seeing people, and they're like, well, my doctor gave it to me, you know, and the sense of safety, and that's really why like this podcast and the things you're talking about and the kind of agenda that you push, Logan, is all the same kind of stuff. That be empowered and be balanced in yourself, and do your own research, man, because there's not a whole lot of people that are on your side. Like there's not like a default professional that's like, I mean, I have a lawyer read all my stuff that I'm going into, if I'm going to buy real estate or if I'm going to, like, whatever it is, like it behooves me to do that. That's not a language I understand. But at a certain point, if somebody else is paying his wages, whether because he's got to prescribe some pills, I can't trust my doctor fully anymore unless my doctor's at least going to be real enough with me to go, you know, a lot of this stuff is fugazi, and that shit's just made up, and you don't really need that.
You know, we're taught to look for the shit that we're educated to look for, right? Like, you will only look for the shit that you've been taught to see. So when it comes to medicine and stuff like that, a surgeon who's been taught to see, like, okay, look, someone comes into you with shoulder pain, you need to MRI that shit, and as soon as you see a tear, that's where you need to operate.
Right.
But, you know, what if that tear
My
has
only
been...
tool is a knife.
Yeah, I mean, like, if all you got the hammer is a hammer, everything looks like a nail to you.
Right.
But what if that tear has been there since long before the fucking symptoms ever showed up, long before the patient ever experienced shoulder pain? Like, where's the pain then? Where's the source of the problem? What's the source of dysfunction? You know, these are the questions that medical professionals need to be asking. You know, it's like, oh, okay, you know, this person's there's too much salt in their diet. They have high blood pressure. Dude, have you ever thought that maybe like just fucking stress of dealing with life?
All of it, man.
You know,
and then but also the medicine being the cure being worse than the disease. There's like we just
side effects.
Buried, Mrs. Bauer this last year, and she got diagnosed with cancer, with terminal cancer. She's gonna die. They give her a date. She's gonna die, and then they've exhausted chemo because it's destroying her body, and they go, you know, you're gonna die anyway. You won't make it through Christmas, and she. Then they said, there's this other guy in Chicago, and he's got this experimental drug, and then so she takes that, and but it's an experimental drug. It's not like if you got an experimental drug in the fucking medical field, that shit's not even supposed to work. They're just using you to run out what the bugs are in their shit, like that, like, and so, and I guess, and I don't know what's right or wrong or what choice I would make if I were in that position, or you know, whatever, any of that stuff. There's no right answer in that, I don't think. But the thing is that whole thing of being of feeling like I'm unwell and I need a pill to get me well is one problem, instead of like I've eaten or behaved in a way that's brought me into sickness and I can maybe eat or behave a way and bring me back into health is one huge conversation.
It's like what Logan was talking about earlier about respecting the process.
Right.
I mean, there's a process that's at play that fed to your dysfunction, that fed to your disease, that fed to whatever you're suffering from. And, you know, we as modern man, unfortunately, have gotten so fucking impatient that we just want to abdicate that responsibility and just let it be in the hands of a pill.
And then secondarily, we're going to die. And then at what point do we go, okay, I'm willing to not rally against this anymore, and I'm willing to go, I'm going to have these next little bits of time, instead of being poisoned by pharmacology, I'm going to have them be as pleasant as I can until that occurrence happens. And it's interesting how we're so insulated from the idea of death or that conversation or what an afterlife would be or what this life is or what it, like all of that stuff. And then we have like spook stories around it is the best that we can do. And because nobody knows, and people that say that they know are full of shit. But that kind of thing of like when do we let go, or when does that become okay and acceptable, as opposed to I'm going to hang on and cling to it even if I'm breathing through a tube and I'm shitting in a bag and I can't, like, my whole quality of life is gone and it will never get good again.
But that's where that whole conversation about seek death comes in. You know, like the pirate life, seek death. It's like if you live in a way that respects that death could be around any corner, you want to optimize that life. You want to live you want to live as richly as you can, do the most good that you can, and live a life that where if you get offed the next second, you don't have regrets. You truly did your best. Not like you justified your best, but you really did your best.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a participatory life. You know,
a participatory life.
Are things happening to you, or are you participating in your own life?
Someone is talking about choices, you know, making those choices in life, and I think about I forget the name of the book right now. There's a Taoist author that wrote it, but he was talking about destiny and he was talking about fate and the distinction of what those two are, and kind of what I took from it is that fate is what's going to just occur if you don't do anything. It's a life that you're, whatever it is, whether it's working for this job that you're supposed to work for because your family always did, or whatever the thing is. And what a destiny is something that you'll have to beat your faith away, or that fate away, and you'll have to strive towards, and you'll have to work towards, and you'll have to think about it and think about the mechanics of it, and mold yourself into a person that befits their destiny, which will occur, you know. And then that goes into a whole thing about, you know, free will versus is there, you know, is there a free will, or is there just a script that we either form ourselves best to fit it or we don't, and we're ill-fitted, and then we kind of are like abject about our whole life, or we fit ourselves to fit that the best we can, and we're a huge proponent into this next evolution of life.
Yeah, but I mean, free will is a lot of work, Tait, so I don't know.
Patience isn't sexy, right?
Are you guys hungry?
Let's eat.
All right. We'll be over at Whole Foods across the street, y'all. Thank you so much for listening. And Twitters and all that. We got
Twitter.
Functional Coach. Functional Coach
Yep.
is where you can find Logan. At Deuce Gym. DEUCE for you fucking knuckleheads that never went to school.
DEUCE_Gym.
And Dr. Mark Cheng. That's MarkCheng.
And I'm at taitimusmaximus. And thanks for listening, man. We'll talk soon, hopefully.
Thank you, guys. That was awesome.